For the first step of the still life practice, we're going to be using blending, hatching, and cross hatching to show transitions from light to dark and really practice increased contrast and how to blend each of those techniques to get the best overall value change in whatever objects you're going to be using for your still life. So that's the first part. In the next video, in the next step, we're going to be working with shading 3 spheres, using each of these techniques to really apply value change, contrast, and seeing how a light source affects objects. But to get started, you're going to separate out your section on your page into 3 different sections for blending, hatching, and cross hatching. So I'm just doing a small rectangle here and dividing it into 3. Remember that large gray piece of paper that you're using, not to use the whole page, maybe just the top quarter of it, since you're going to be doing a practice still life on the rest of it. So I'm just working in the upper right hand corner in a small section. I'm going to be going from dark to light, so on the right side here is going to be darker, and then I'm fading into a lighter value. And I'm starting out with the 2B charcoal. The purpose of the 2B is because it's a lot harder, so it's going to not create as dark of a value at first. So I'm going to start as light as possible and then eventually darken up the blending. But the first one here that I've been working on is the blending technique, where I'm going from dark to light using blending. So I'm really using small circles to make sure that everything is really smooth and fades and transitions from that dark to light as cleanly as possible. After I finished the section with the 2B, I then switched and went to the 6B, which is a lot softer, so it's going to create a lot darker value change. I'm going to pause this here. So as you're shading, again, you're using small circles to make sure that everything is blended correctly. If you're just shading with lines, you're going to see some of those marks. So you want everything to be smooth. I started with the 2B for the first layer, just pressing a lot harder on the right where it's darker, and then slowly easing up the pressure as I went towards the left as it got lighter. You don't want to see a spot where there's a clear transition from light to dark, so it should just be a smooth transition the whole way versus having one spot where it jumps from really light to really dark really quickly. So keep it smooth. From here, I'm switching to the white charcoal. And I'm using the same technique of shading, blending with those small circles. And since the left is supposed to be a lot lighter, I'm going to press a lot harder with the white charcoal on the far left in that lighter spot and just blend it in towards the right where it's darker. And then for this technique too, using the blending stump will really help to smooth things out and really emphasize, again, a clean transition of light to dark. So I'm using that blending stump and I'm just blending using those little circles again. And then I switched sides when I got about halfway and flipped my blending stump so I had a clean edge as I went in with the white side to fade it into dark. So next I'm jumping down to the second technique, which is called hatching. Hatching is where you're just using line to create your value change. And the nice thing with using line is that you can really emphasize form and texture a bit more. So it's going to look a little more stylized, and I think it's a cool technique to try and see if it's something that you're interested in. There's a lot you can do to really emphasize the form of objects using line, which we'll look at more on the next step. I'm going to go ahead and play this. So for hatching, I'm starting out with the 2B again so that it's a lot lighter, and then eventually I can darken up those lines. I'm putting my lines a lot closer together and pressing a lot harder on the far right where it's going to be darker, and then slowly easing up the pressure and spreading those lines a bit further apart. Again, I'm not just going to go across it once and call it finished. I'm building my layers, so I'm going over the darker side a few times and just transitioning it over. And then I'm, same thing, going in with the white charcoal, starting on the left, working with those lines being a lot closer together, overlapping more, and then fading in. I'm going over it one more time here just to make sure that there's plenty of contrast between light and dark. So the third one is cross hatching. Cross-hatching is similar to hatching, but this time I'm going to go across my lines just to really emphasize contrast and form. Cross-hatching is one of my favorite techniques. I think you can definitely do a lot with it. So I'll be interested to see how you guys apply it and how you use it in your projects. But cross-hatching is great for emphasizing form and really making those objects a lot more three-dimensional. So I'm going over it in a couple of different directions. I started vertically and then just switched up and went over the marks 2 different directions there twice. And then I'm switching with the white charcoal as well to really emphasize those lighter highlight areas. Then one more time with the black charcoal to make sure that I have a good amount of contrast. So those are the 3 different blending techniques. We'll be practicing them again in the next step on spheres, but it will be your choice of which of these you end up using for your final still life project.